So, as you're trying to show why the Darwinian theory of evolution doesn't work, I know there are Christians in other circles that are trying to see that perhaps this is the way God worked the creation and brought about the species. So, do you think that theistic evolution is the best explanation of the biblical and scientific data that we have?
I do not, and I find the strategy somewhat curious. That at just the time that secular evolutionary biologists are acknowledging that mainstream neo-Darwinian theory is in need of replacement or significant supplementation, that theistic evolutionists would be wanting to baptize the Darwinian mechanism of mutation and selection as the way by which God created. The recognition among many secular evolutionary biologists is that mutation and selection has very limited creative power, for some of the reasons I've alluded to. So if the mechanism has limited creative power, why say that that's the means by which God created? If you wanted to say he did something else over and above that, well, that would be some sort of theory of intelligent design. But they typically don't say that. They want to say that he worked through these known mechanisms and in a way which made his own activity undetectable. And that's a scientific problem. If the neo-Darwinian mechanism lacks creative power, then invoking that as the means by which God created lacks scientific explanatory power. It makes no sense. But it isn't just, I think in addition to there being scientific problems with theistic evolution, I think there are also theological problems, because the essence of the Darwinian claim is that the appearance of design is the product of an undirected, unguided process. That's why it's merely an appearance and not real. Richard Dawkins has said, biology is the study of complicated things that give the appearance of having been designed for a purpose. And that's his way of saying there is no actual design, only the illusion of design. Francisco Ayala says that in Darwinism we have design, meaning the effect, without a designer, because the undirected process of mutation and selection does all the work. So if mutation and selection are in effect designer substitutes, then what exactly is God doing in the theistic evolutionary scenario? Usually it's something vague like upholding the laws of nature in a way that we can't detect. But that really, I think, results in a very diminished form of divine sovereignty. God has nothing to do in the theistic evolutionary scenario other than sort of watch the process unfold from the mezzanine. And anyway, there are another way to put it is, if the process of the Darwinian mechanism is inherently unguided and undirected, and that's something that Darwinists necessarily affirm because they deny there's any real design. It's all merely the appearance of design. And because it's apparent design and not real, then we can be sure that the mechanism is unguided. If it were guided, then the design would be real, but it's not. So it's unguided. So how does God then guide an unguided mechanism? That's a logical problem. So you've got theological problems in that God doesn't seem to be doing anything in creation other than in a very remote sense, possibly creating the universe at the beginning and keeping the laws of nature going. But he has no active role in the production of forms of life. That's all done by these impersonal mechanisms. But there's also the logical problem that is, if he is in some way guiding the process, the process is supposed to be, by definition, unguided. So how does God guide an unguided process? It's actually kind of a mess. It's incoherent, as well as contrary to the scientific evidence. We have a big book called Theistic Evolution, a scientific, philosophical, and theological critique. And I'd recommend it to pastors, theologians, philosophers, and scientists who want to grapple with these questions in a deeper way. It's always good to ask the theistic evolutionist, what do you think? Oh, okay, so you're a theistic evolutionist. What is God doing with respect to the evolutionary process? Is the evolutionary process a guided or an unguided process? And they typically don't want to answer that question. and which is a way of saying that they don't really have a very well worked out idea of what God is actually doing. But most, if you press them, will say, well, God is not guiding the process. The mutation selection mechanism do the work. He's simply he created the laws of nature at the beginning that allows that to happen. So he's very, very remote and uninvolved in the process of creation.